Everybody out there, thank you for joining us here again at Pursuit of Purpose for our podcast. We are on site at the Lumberton, Texas Masonic Lodge. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we have with us a very special guest. He's a local legend. I'm going to let him introduce himself.
I am Fred Lovell, a member of Lumberton Lodge 1430, the Supreme Lodge of Southeast Texas.
And that is a famous line that he uses at every meeting that he attends. Known far and wide throughout Texas Masonry, it usually gets a pretty good laugh. But if Fred is present at a Masonic meeting, you know he's going to say it. Something else Fred does, and he's very humble about it, is he's one of the greatest cooks that Southeast Texas has probably ever known. In fact, he's famous, almost infamous for it. Oh, if you ever go somewhere that Fred's cooking, it's very likely that you're going to overeat. Very likely. And, you know, they say never trust a skinny chef, right?
Right.
So, Fred, where were you born?
Alexander, Louisiana. It was actually Pineville, Louisiana.
Okay.
The river is the only thing that separates them. And I was born on the Pineville side.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you swam across the river, you'd be in Alexandria.
Yep.
Okay. So you were born at an early age, I'm going to guess.
Pretty early.
Yeah. So how many siblings were in your house growing up?
Let's see, five of us.
There were 5 of you. Where'd you land in the mix, age-wise?
Next to the youngest.
Next to the young. So you were a middle child.
Yeah, well, in the middle, yeah.
Okay, that kind of accounts for that outspoken personality that you have. Most middle children have the personality like that. They're very social and, you know, outspoken.
They need to be heard.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. So how long did you stay? How long did your family live there? Did you grow up all the way in Pineville?
It was really poor life. We actually lived in Pollock,
Okay.
which is about 20 miles on north. And it was a very poor upraising. And so by the time I was 5 years old, my dad moved to Lubbock, Texas. Lubbock was a tremendous growing city then, actually a town, just not really the size of a town in those days. But he worked for a bus company. He worked on the buses, keeping them going. So he tripled his wages from Pollock to Lubbock.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So moving into Lubbock, there was nothing available to live in, no places to rent and all. And so my dad was going to have a house built. Well, that takes time too. And so the man that was going to build a house had a potato shed. It was a big, huge warehouse. And so he cleaned all the potatoes down to one end of it and put in a faucet and a bathtub and a cook stove and refrigerator and a bed in one end of it. And that's where we all stayed when we moved to Lubbock for about 9 months till our house was built.
So there were 7 of you, 5 kids,
Yep.
and 2 grown folks
Yep.
living in a potato shed.
Yep, that's what it was.
A converted potato. That is impressive.
That is.
And look, now 9 months, you were in Lubbock. That's way up yonder in the northern part of Texas.
Yeah.
It gets cold up there.
Yeah.
And a potato shed, it was not likely very well insulated at all.
It wasn't insulated at all.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And it was dark in all of it except right where we stayed. And we had some lights. They're not even as bright as these lights, but you know, you could see to move around decent. So it wasn't nothing spectacular, but it's a place to stay.
Wow. Wow.
So did you live out the rest of your growing years there? Or?
No, sir.
Okay.
My dad was big on moving.
Okay.
He was pretty well. I took after him, I guess, pretty good. He was hard headed, and so if it didn't go his way exactly, if sometimes they change his pay, sometimes they just aggravate him. Anyway, he would drag up, move, and it seemed like something strange about my dad. He didn't want to move across town ever. He wanted to move across the state. And so we left Lubbock and went to Anthony, New Mexico.
Wow.
And Anthony was kind of on the borderline of New Mexico and Texas. As a matter of fact, the address back in them days was Anthony, New Mexico, Texas, because the post office sit on the line. But anyway, we were there a couple of years, and then we moved to Louisiana.
Back to Louisiana.
All the way across the state of Texas again.
So y'all just zigzagged all over the place.
It seemed like that was the thing about my dad. He wanted never to move across town. He wanted to move across the state of Texas. And so that was a lot of our growing up, just different localities. I used to tell the story about my mother. She was a tremendous cook, and she cooked according to the locality that we were in. In Louisiana, she cooked culinary food. In West Texas, she cooked like West Texas people cook and eat. And in New Mexico, she cooked like Mexicans cook. So she kind of acquired a little bit of a hot taste to her food in New Mexico. And so my dad, it'd give me the hiccups if it was very hot. So my dad would just sit there at the table until I eat some. And if I didn't get the hiccups, he would serve his plate.
You were the tester.
Yep.
You were like the litmus test.
That's
you know,
it.
you would indicate the spicy level of
That's
the food
it.
with your hiccups.
That's
pretty funny.
That is.
That is pretty
Yeah.
funny. So, how old were you when you moved back to Louisiana? Can you remember?
Well, yeah, I was probably in about the fourth or fifth grade, maybe about the fourth or fifth grade. Yeah,
Still pretty young.
yeah.
9 or 10.
My older two brothers, of course, they went to school in the same grade together. Starting off, my oldest brother failed the first grade, so he took that again, and he failed the second grade, and he took that again.
Right.
So that put him into the third grade the same year as my young brother, just younger than him. So they become, from a third grade on up, they were in the same grade school. And so they both graduated in Louisiana. He played football a lot in New Mexico and was tremendous good. So anyway, LSU tried to get him, but he went in the Air Force, and that changed his whole life. So, but anyway, that's part of living in Louisiana. And we moved to Brownfield, Texas, which is a little bit south of Lubbock. And then we moved from there to Sulphur, Louisiana. The only decent move I guess we ever made was from Sulphur to Lake Charles. And we didn't move across the state that time.
Right. So, at what age? I mean, at where did you graduate high school? Where
Sulphur.
From Sulphur. Okay.
Yeah.
So almost Texas.
Yeah, that's right.
Almost Texas. You were real close when
Yeah.
you were in Sulphur.
What got me in Texas was I'd met my wife in DeQuincy, which is just barely out of Sulphur.
Mm-hmm.
And my cousin, she went to school with a lot of my cousins, so we spent a lot of weekends in DeQuincy and working with my dad in Lake Charles during the week. And so when her dad moved off to Kansas City, Missouri. He worked for KCS Railroad, so he moved pretty regular too. And so they were in Kansas City when she came down and spent the summer with my cousins. And that's when I asked her about getting married. And so when she agreed, well, my dad told me about a job in Port Arthur that would be ideal for me to get going on my own. Mm-hmm. So went down, applied for it, and got the job. So I told the service manager it'd be a week before I could start work because I had to go to Missouri and get married. That was not a problem. So we did. So that's kind of an interesting story you want to hear. I had $25 from paycheck from Lake Charles. And so I used gas money, come down to Port Arthur, got the job, went back, borrowed my dad's 58 Chevrolet Impala, and it got better gas mileage than my car. So
what on earth did you drive that an Impala got better mileage?
57 two-door hardtop Chevrolet and it was just a little old 283, but boy, it drank that.
My goodness, it must.
It did. That Impala had a 348, big old motor. Mm. But it is one of those cars that got super mileage. Mm. Anyway, we took off with $25 and headed to Missouri. Got up there, and a funny thing that when you tell that story today, we had to take a blood test. Mm. People say, right, what was a blood test for getting married? Well, in those days, you had to have a blood test. Mm. So that cost $2 for the license. And then we give the preacher $2. There was just 6 of us, me and Virginia and her mother and dad, and her mother's grandfather was an ordained minister, and him and his wife, and so they married us. And we made it back to Port Arthur. We wanted to had to rent a place to stay. So my wife got out and looked and found a place, the 500 block of 7th Street, downtown Port Arthur. But I only worked a couple of blocks from the shop so I could walk to work. Mm. But it was $28 a month. But because we didn't have that kind of money, the lady that was going to rent us the place said that we could pay her by the week till we got a few paychecks. Mm. And we had bought a couple of dollars worth of food. So it was $7 for the week and then $2 more for the food. So we were down to 50 cents.
Man.
She bought us a coffee pot. The landlord bought us a coffee pot and a pot to cook stuff in. She just out of kindness, she just bought that stuff for us. We didn't have nothing. So my mother called me and said, was I coming to Lake Charles that weekend? I said, no, ma'am. We don't have enough money. She said, well, what about gas? Have you got enough to get over here? I said, yeah, but then I can't get back to work. And she said, you get over here. She said, I got a vacation check for you. I thought, well, I didn't have no vacation check coming. But the guy in the office, when he found out that I had quit and was going to go get married, then he fixed up a vacation check for me. Oh. Back in them days, you didn't stamp a signature, you had to sign them all. So the owner, Joe Cagle, the guy just put a whole bunch of checks there together, and he just going through and signing them, moving them over and signing them. He signed my vacation check.
He didn't even know what he signed. They did that for you. That's awesome.
Yeah. Wow. So we all of a sudden was rich, it seemed like.
Yes.
So we got started with our life.
with
Just
that
like that
vacation.
lady.
That is awesome.
That's
That's a great story. Thank you for sharing that.
yes.
I was telling John Fleck about that the other day. He was questioning me about stuff, and he said $25. He said, "You have a young man ask a girl today about getting married, and he ain't got but $25." She'll tell him that won't even pay for my what's some fancy coffee.
Oh, the Starbucks.
Yes.
I won't even pay for my Starbucks.
Oh, if you told a girl that these days, they'd laugh at you.
Right.
That's crazy. That's an amazing story, Fred.
Yeah.
Something I've noticed about you, and I've known you a long time since I was a little kid. You've had a shop here in town, an automotive shop, and you have always been a kind person, always helpful to other people in the community, whether they deserved it or not. And you've always operated with a fair amount of discipline in your life. So I'm going to ask you, looking back on your childhood home, what was discipline like for you as a little boy growing up?
Not even zero sample today. Not even close to a sample today. My dad was strict. My dad didn't make a lot of rules, but the rules he made, you abided by them or you got a blistering. And I'm talking about he knew how to blister. It wasn't no little hand spanking they got today. It was a real blistering. And so, that was my discipline is if he made a rule, you abided by that. There was, you couldn't ask him why. To the kids today, this is why. My dad's rule was why is because he said it. That's why.
And if you got up the gumption to ask why, what do you think would have happened?
That was no gumption there. You knew what was coming.
So I'm curious now. I mean, that's been a long time since you experienced that childhood. Looking back on it, do you have regret about that, or do you feel like it shaped you to be what you are, or how do you feel about that?
Yes, I think it did powerful shaping. And as much as all discipline has changed in the years, I think that discipline there mattered a lot more than the discipline they use today. Yes, it mattered. It shaped me.
How did it play into you and your own children and raising them? How did you parlay that forward?
I did it basically the same way. I take a lot after my dad, and so he had a rule which I stand by. If you live under my roof, you live under my rules. Now, you don't have to live under my rules, but you can't live under my roof without abiding by my rules. And I've always said, on my property, I make the rules. Now, when I get off of my property, I get out there in the street, I get out here in the world, I abide by the world's rules.
Right.
It's not an option, and I know it, and so I don't hesitate. I'm fully abide by laws and rules of the world. But on my property, I make the rules.
So when you were in high school in Sulphur, what kind of grades did you make?
Not nothing great. My dad never required an A/B honor roll student. He required you pass. He kind of did like I told my son, you don't have to be the smartest one in the class, but you're not the dumbest one. So you're going to pass.
Right.
That's fair.
It is. Did you participate in anything in school, high school, other than just go to class?
Well, no, I played some baseball growing up. Okay. My dad was a really good baseball player, and I played some baseball. I was real small growing up.
What happened?
Yeah, what I mean. I guess my wife's cooking.
Yeah, I didn't mean around. You're taller, and I mean, you didn't stay small.
No,
that all happened though after I got grown. I wasn't ever big. I didn't weigh 150 pounds, wasn't even 6 foot tall till probably 24, 25 years old.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
We have a son that's like that. You know him. He lives by you.
Yep.
And when he was growing up, he was not a very big kid. And then after school, he just shot up like a weed.
Wow.
He shot up. He became a big old boy.
I want to comment too. That is a powerful, good boy.
Thank you. Thank you very much. That means a lot coming from you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So when you were in school, did you have a recollection? Can you remember what you wanted to do with your life?
Well, yeah. When I can remember that when I was 13 years old,
Okay.
the school kind of promoted us all, or pushed us all to pick out a vocation or craft or whatever that we wanted to become in life.
Right.
So I went and talked to my dad, and I told him, I'd really want to consider being a mechanic. And he said, well, son, I'm going to advise you to do something else in life. It's hard work. But I will tell you this, I can teach you to be a mechanic, a really good mechanic. And the only thing that I can assure you about you being a mechanic is, so long as they make them 4-wheel SOBs, he called them, they're going to break down.
Yep.
And as long as they break down, they're going to need mechanics.
Yeah.
So the one thing you won't have to worry about in all your life is a job.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Somebody's going to want you to do the job.
Right. And that's a whole different, that kind of mechanic work, working on cars the way you did and what they do nowadays
It's different.
is 180 degrees
Yeah.
difference.
Yeah.
Right.
You actually repaired vehicles where nowadays the vehicles are made as such to where they just replace parts.
Yeah,
They hook a computer up to it the best they can, figure out what parts to start replacing and start replacing parts.
Wow.
Right?
Yep, that's right.
But back then, you actually, whatever it took, I mean, whatever it was, you could fix it. You didn't have to necessarily all the time order parts and this, that. You were able to actually work on a car.
I guess you could even do a little bit of boneyarding if y'all had cars around. You could get parts and as opposed to.
You could even repair individual parts.
That's right.
Yeah.
Uh,
So you have really seen the transition in that industry.
Oh yeah. And that's what happened. I owned my own shop here in Lumberton for 25 years and had a really good reputation. The only thing of it is I was from old school and I knew how to repair anything mechanical. If it was mechanical, a quick deal, quick, I'll tell you. I was in my office working paperwork and all, and one of the mechanics come in and he was having trouble with a particular item out back, was giving him a fit. And so he looked at me and I said, well, just sit down and get you a cup of coffee. That's mechanical. I can fix that. Get you a cup of coffee. I'll be back in a few minutes. I went out and fixed it, come back in. He was still drinking his cup of coffee. And he'd done been wrestling it for a while. Mm-hmm. So, but saying that same thing, if it was computer related or electronics, that boy could fix it and I couldn't.
So y'all complimented each other real well working together. I'll tell you what, and I'm sure this happened to you many times. When I would work on a vehicle, sometimes you'd be blind to the fix that's right there in front because you're too close to it. You're in it and you done got emotional about it.
Yeah.
So you can't see it anymore. And, sometimes you get away from it for a few minutes and come back to it. The solution's obvious.
That's happened to many a time in my life, growing up and doing mechanical mechanic work.
Yeah.
Is I'd be wrestling with something and it's time to back off of it.
Mm-hmm.
You gather up a couple of guys, go down to the coffee shop, drinking some coffee, come back, and it seemed like that part just jumped in place.
Isn't that fascinating? It's some emotions, man.
Yeah.
When you get your emotions tied into anything, it just screw you all up. I mean, that's that way in life.
Yeah,
That's a very powerful lesson to apply anywhere in life.
yeah, it is.
Right.
So
So in our business, with a lot of coaching and counseling and working with I guess the mechanics of people,
Yeah,
they're so close because they, their feelings get in the way. They can't hear what their wife's saying. They can't understand what their kids are saying. But we get the chance to kind of pull them away from it a little bit, and it's almost the exact same effect. Before they leave our office, they have I never thought about that.
yeah,
It happens so often.
Yeah.
Fred. It's kind of fun to be a part of because you realize you're giving them a chance.
and most of the time, just like you, if we're doing our job right, we're not giving them the solution. We're just helping them see it.
mm-hmm.
We're helping them open their eyes to the obvious truth that was always there, and they always knew it.
Yeah.
We just help them see it.
They just all they needed was a cup of coffee.
I know an example of that right there is a man that lived here in Lumberton for years. He died a few years back, but he was here for way before me. John Ferguson. He was my boss for a while at the sulfur company. And John was country as hell, but he was smart. And so when I would go to him with a problem that I was having fixing a vehicle, well, he'd ask me a question, I'd answer it, and he'd think about something, and he'd ask me a question, I'd answer it. And so about 30 minutes there of talking back and forth, and man, all of a sudden, I knew the solution. I said, man, I know what that was. It's such and such. John, man, you're right. That cat knew all the time, but he would not give me the answer. He would question me with enough questions until I solved it. In my own mind, I solved it. He solved it.
He was counseling
He
you.
was counseling me.
Come on.
He was helping you grow. That's right.
You're right. He
That's
was
a wise
big time.
man.
He was really smart.
Yeah.
That's a good story.
I used to tell the black guy that worked with me there, don't never tell that man a lie. Tell him like it is. If it hurts, tell him like it is, because he's going to ask you enough questions, enough different ways that pretty soon he's going to know you lied.
Yeah.
So just tell him up front.
Then you ain't got to worry about it.
That's right.
But you know what he was doing? There's a word for it. He was mentoring you,
Yeah.
and probably everybody that he worked with. He was
Yep.
trying to develop them to as high a potential as they could reach.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. That's a good
Yeah.
man to work with. Good man to have on your
I
side.
was proud of him.
Yeah. So how did you end up at the sulfur company?
Well, it was really him. I worked for Gulf States at the old Nature's power plant, and wasn't making very little money, but I had to work somewhere I had good insurance because my son back in those days was deathly sick all the time. He had double pneumonia a bunch of times. And, people were lucky to live over double pneumonia one time,
Mm-hmm.
and he had it several.
Mhm.
So that was all pretty tough times back then. And so sulfur company was needing a good mechanic. So John called me and talked to me. And so I told him, well, I can't go to work because there's always a length of time there you're without insurance. And I said, I can't afford to be without insurance a single day. He said, well, you're talking to me on the correct day. He said, I got the insurance man right here in the office. He said, let's talk to him. So he asked him, when would their sulfur company's insurance start insuring me? He said, if I quit and went to work for the sulfur company, the day that Gulf States insurance quit paying would be the day they would start paying.
Well, that worked out.
So I went to work for the sulfur company.
Shoot, yeah. So we've skipped over a couple of things, obviously, in your story. So you told your dad you wanted to be a mechanic. Then somehow or another, you ended up working for Gulf States at the power plant, right?
Mm-hmm.
And where did you, how, was that right after high school that you went there, or?
No.
Okay.
It was well after we'd been married.
Okay.
I think I had both of I did have both the kids by then.
Okay.
and said back in those days, well, mechanics worked differently than they do today. You worked on strictly commission.
That's right.
It was 50% of what you produced. If you produced $200 worth of labor, you got $100. And you were there pretty well 40 hours, didn't matter, but just because you were there 40 hours didn't mean you would produce 40 hours of labor. So you may not produce but 10 hours of labor. And if so, you collected 5 of those 10 hours of labor. And so things were pretty tough with my son deathly sick all the time. Well, pretty well, we didn't pay any real bills back in those days because we didn't have the money. All my cash from every payday was going to either medicine, some kind of breathing apparatus, paying the doctor all that we could pay him, paying the hospital very little, no insurance. And so it was really, really tough days back in them days. And so when I got the opportunity to go to work for Gulf States with good insurance, first time ever, well, he was already 4 years old about. So him being sick and just all the time spending money on him, all that we could afford or could come up with. Then because of those tough times, well, then when I got the opportunity to have some insurance, pay for a little bit of that, I went to work for him. And so started doing a little better in life and a little better even at the sulfur company. And that's when I really become comfortable. Never been rich, ain't rich yet today, but comfortable in the days, because before those days, I never paid bills on time, period. A quick example, every story seems to take time.
Of course.
But one of the stories I'll tell is I had a 1963 Superfort Chevrolet.
Oh, yeah.
I paid notes on it 9 years. Now, all during that time, I couldn't pay the whole note. So one time the finance man called me and he said, Fred, he said that you're kind of getting behind on your payments. And so I explained to him, about my son being sick and everything. So he said, well, to save your credit and all and to save your car, he said, how about you just pay me the interest on the payment? I said, well, it depends on how much it is. He said, well, it's $9 a month. I said, I'll pay you $9 a month. He said, well, you just pay that, however long it takes. And then he said, then when you can start paying on the note, then we'll begin on the principal again. But in the meantime, you'll just pay that $9 a month. I paid that for well over a year, about a couple of years. Anyway, during the 9 years I paid on that thing, well, I moved twice, back to Louisiana and back to Texas and back to Louisiana. And of course, they transferred the note over to a different finance company. We didn't deal with banks in them days. So they sent it to a finance company in Louisiana. Anyway, back and forth. They lost the note.
Oh, no.
They lost the title to the car. So once I'd paid for it, 9 years, it's paid for, done deal. It took them 2 years to find my title.
Oh my goodness.
So
Wow.
those were pretty memorable days.
Yeah.
Huge, yeah, man. So from the sulfur company, what happened next?
Okay, well, I worked for them 10 years. I told them one time that they wouldn't be able to fire me from that job. I said, I like this job. I'm going to be with it. I said, the only way you're going to get rid of me is if you close down. So 10 years, they closed down.
They took you up on that.
Yeah, they took me up on it. They had to cut back. the big wigs of the sulfur company that had originated it and all, it was all on an airplane and crashed and killed 3 or 4 of them. And so the French had been trying to buy it all along anyway. So then that all went through then. A few months, probably 6 months after that crash, and the French bought them out. And so they had turnarounds and shutdowns and all. And so they laid off a lot of people. They retired a lot of people. They transferred a lot of people. And they gave me an opportunity to go down to New Gulf, which is below, south and west of Houston. And that's an old town that was formed by the company. It was a company-owned town. You rented from the company. The houses belonged to the company. Streets belonged to everything. Store belonged to them. And so you rented your house from the company, and you bought groceries and all from the company, and electricity, everything. So it's one of those deals, and it was kind of a close-knit community, and I had had a chance to go down there and work for just a week on a particular project that I was better at than anybody, so they sent me down there for that purpose. But anyway, they'd give me a sample of it, and I didn't want no more. So when they gave me the opportunity to transfer down there or be laid off, I said, I've had 10 good years with the sulfur company. I think I'll quit while I'm ahead.
There you go.
So I quit. And so, not being real successful about any of the careers there, I decided to open my own shop. And that took me about 5 months of fiddling around doing different odd jobs and all. But anyway, I finally swung it and I opened Fred's Automotive.
So going from being an employee all your working life, then you moved into the entrepreneurial independent business owners club. A lot of people, they admire that membership until they get their very own membership card. And then they're like, oh my gosh, what have I done? Right.
Yeah.
So how did that work out for you in the beginning?
Well, in the beginning, it was plenty tough. Bankers know what they're talking about. So when I went to try to borrow money, I didn't have enough experience. And I didn't have enough money. I had a little bit from the sulfur company I got, but it seemed like a lot to me at the time, but it didn't seem like nothing to them. And so I stayed after the different banks and different ways. And Pete Matthews, he was the owner of it's a small engine shop.
Okay.
Triangle engine.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, and Pete Matthews had been my service manager at Chevrolet for a few years when I worked for him. So talked to Pete, and so Pete finally just swung the deal and fixed it so I could get the loan. And with the bankers telling me what they told me, I didn't have to be in business but 1 month, and I realized they knew what they were talking about.
Right.
I didn't have enough business experience. I knew how to fix vehicles, but owning a repair shop that's not even close.
No.
So I got a lot of expensive experience.
Yes, sir.
And but I made up my mind when I went into business. I told my mechanics, I want my customers treated like we're going to work on their vehicle 20 years. I said, they're not going to be a fly-by-night customer. We're not going to be a fly-by-night repair shop. We're going to be here for 20 years, and I want to repeat business from every customer for 20 years. That's really, really hard to accomplish. I didn't accomplish every customer, but I accomplished a bunch of them.
There you go.
I had a lot of people regretted that I went out of business.
Yeah, your shop is still talked about
Yep.
Today, about its reputation, about the way you ran your business. And hearing you say that, it makes a lot of sense. Knowing that you told your staff, this is what we're doing. We're here to stay, and we want people coming back.
Right.
That's that speaks volumes. That speaks to your character. That you had great integrity and intentions
Yeah.
when you went at it, and that's what gave you the success that you achieved.
Yeah.
So then the question is, were you successful, and are you successful?
Well, you know, me personally saying, I feel like I was not successful because of what the banks said originally. I didn't have enough business experience. And so I let out money that I shouldn't have let out. I give discounts that shouldn't have been given. I did so many things wrong that to me, I wasn't successful. Now, to say that I wasn't successful completely, no, I can't say that because I put my children through high school, bought them vehicles to drive, bought our personal vehicles and paid for them, I built a house and paid for it and property. And so with all that being said, and when I retired, that everything that I had was paid for. I didn't owe nobody nothing. Then yes, in that sense, I think I was successful.
I think you're more successful than you give yourself credit for. I appreciate your humility. I really do. But not only did you achieve what you're talking about now is financial freedom, which is what you have, which is a huge form of success by any measure today, or any day for that matter. No one can dispute that as being successful. But what you did that's even bigger than that, you created a legacy of honesty.
Yeah.
You created a legacy of caring for others, empathy,
Trustworthiness.
yes, a legacy of character. And you didn't just do that yourself. You taught every mechanic that came to work for you that we're going to operate this way. And if you want to align yourself with this purpose, great, you'll fit in here. But if not, you can go rip somebody off down the road at a different shop.
I have a story to tell about that.
Yeah.
I had hired a big old mechanic. He was pretty hard-headed too. And so he had worked for me a couple of weeks, and he was doing a tune-up job. And I happened to walk by, and I noticed that the battery cables were real corroded. And so I told him, I said, I'm glad that we got this vehicle here. It's made me think of something that I hadn't told you about. But here at this shop, when we do a tune-up, a starter replace, or alternator replace, or battery replace, we clean and insulate the battery terminals every job. And he said, including tune-ups? I said, especially tune-ups. And he said, well, I don't know if I'll be able to remember that. So I stepped up real close to his face and I said, let me explain it another way. You'll remember, or the mechanic that replaces you will.
Yeah.
He had zero trouble remembering because after that, I hired a couple of other young mechanics at different points, and he gathered them up first thing and explained it all to them.
He became your best trainer.
Yeah,
He did.
that's kind of.
I like that language.
You converted him to your way of thinking, that
That's
he
right.
began to convert others.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is, I love it. We've all been the member of different organizations and various other things. And if somebody comes in and we're inviting them to be a part of it, like, oh, you're an electrician, come be a part of our group. Come be a part of our group. And they said, well, I don't know if this is for me. Okay, well, who's your best competitor? Because we're looking for them. And all of a sudden they, well, wait a minute, I might want to, there you go. Now you're thinking like somebody who wants to grow.
Yeah.
He needed a little growth spurt.
Yep.
Yes, that was a good one.
So if you had to think about it, this is a hard question. It's not actually one that I ask everybody. If you had to look back on your business and when you were running Fred's Automotive, that was when your kids were, growing up and all that kind of stuff. Talk about some of your proudest moments.
Well, I don't know. I guess really when I really felt like pat myself on the back was I can remember really good. I had a couple of times, they were several years apart, that, man, I was really, really down. Business was slow. I couldn't figure, what all we had done wrong, that, nobody was coming in. And the ones that were coming in seemed like I was getting ripped off. And so I had this feeling in my mind that maybe I had a neon flashing light over my head. Come get to Fred, he's easy. So being depressed and I used to never be able to figure out that people got depressed, but I found out that, yeah, you can. Mm. And I was, those 2 times where I was really depressed, and had a customer, good long time customer, both times it was a different person, just came into my shop. This first one, she had a big old platter, big round platter of all different selections of different meats and cheeses and pickles and different things, and set them up there on the counter and said, "Here, Fred, we just wanted you to know we appreciate your doing business."
Wow.
And walked back out the door. And you went from the very lowest feeling to you're the king of the world. Mm-hmm. And so that happened to me twice. And so I knew there are a lot of good people out there.
Well, you ain't joking.
A lot of good people.
And it's funny. I mean, I give credit to God for fixing things like that in our lives, You've been around me a while, and you watched me transition from one type of life to another and doing this. And I've experienced things very similar to that. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So looking back at it, and I'm real proud to hear you say that. That's good. If you had to look back and say, these were my mistakes, what would you say?
Oh, yeah.
Some of the big, ones that stand out to you.
Yeah. I know for sure. And of course, number one is it always goes back to my mind about the bank saying I didn't have enough business experience. Well, they were right. It took 25 years to actually get business experience to get started. Now I was ready to start it, but I was getting outclassed. The vehicles, there were more computers, and more computers. And the first computer was over my head. I've said it, and then I'll say it another bunch of times, is if it was mechanical, I could fix it. But it was getting to be more computer. Even things that were mechanical were computer activated or computer related. And so it got harder and harder for me to be able to know what to do to fix them. And I'll go way back. When I was training under my dad, the one thing that I knew about my dad was, and he was back in the old school days, mechanical. And so if my dad couldn't fix something that rolled in the shop, there was no need in him going asking another mechanic, because if he couldn't fix it, they couldn't fix it. So he would just wrestle with it until he did fix it. And so I was proud of those younger days and all, knowing that I could do that kind of stuff. But they got to where that there was not enough of that to really sustain a shop. You had to do the electronics and the computer, and that was over my head. And I was too old school to retrain. an example of young men growing up today, they do that stuff like you wind up your old watch.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody winds up your old watch no more, but
No.
in them days you did. But I had a young mechanic hired, and so I had an old '62 Chevrolet sitting back there, and I knew it needed a set of points ignition, and had them right there behind my desk. And so I was waiting on a slow time when, they didn't have nothing to do. So that boy didn't have nothing to do one day. So I got him that set of points signature, handed to him and said, here, go put that in that '62 Chevrolet out there. Well, he was out there like an hour. Didn't take but a few minutes. And so he come back in, he said, you don't mind telling me where these go? So,
Well, he'd never seen anything like it.
but yet, if I had a computer related item, he'd have snapped his finger and got it done.
Yes.
So that made me know, there's a difference in the old school and the new school, and I wasn't new school.
One of the things I'm hearing about your story is you had the wisdom to start bringing those people around you.
Yes, sir.
If I don't have to be the person that learns all these things,
Yeah.
I think back to, infamous people like Henry Ford, same thing.
Yep.
I mean, he knew a lot, but I don't have to know everything.
That's
I can
right.
hire people,
Yep.
the same with like banking and business. I need to know enough. And I remember when I went self-employed for the first time, and a gentleman I admire, he and I were talking, he'd already been in business, and he goes, I'm going to give you some advice. I go, thank you. And one of them was go hire a good CPA and do everything he says. I go, yes, sir. And boy, that has saved me,
Yeah.
and even though I'm sitting there looking at near broke, I know I'll be okay, when the tide comes back. And so it sounds like you had similar experiences, especially with the talent.
Yeah.
Because they grew up in an era where it was more second nature.
Yeah, it was. It was really necessary to have that talent hired. I really hated it in a sense because even with them having talent, they weren't necessarily tremendous good at it. So they had to kind of work with a solution. And earlier years, and probably still yet today, computers are confusing. You plug a machine in. I bought the machines. They were high dollar, and they were high dollar to upkeep, but highly necessary. So I furnished a machine. I didn't even know how to turn them on. But those guys would plug them in. Well, the thing about that machine is it analyzes all the computer data, but it might have three things it's showing bad. Well, one thing makes these other three show bad. So it was up to my technicians, they call them, to diagnose which one of those items. Well, sometimes they would come to me and tell me we were stumped on exactly which item. I didn't never like just replacing things and
Right.
okay, but you go to a doctor and he gives you a medicine, you come back in a month and that didn't fix it. Okay, well here's a prescription for another medicine. And you've done paid for that medicine, now you don't pay for this medicine, and you may pay for another one to finally get to what fixes it.
Right.
Well, I didn't like that in mechanic work, and so I didn't want them replacing three items. I want them to diagnose which one of those items it actually is. So they would come to me, and I guess I'd kind of have to do like John Ferguson did. I would question them about something, and they would give me what that does. And I'd question them about something else, and they give me what that does. Well, pretty soon, me asking them enough things and them telling me what different things do, that I could tell, well, this here won't cause all three, and this one won't cause all three, but this one here could. So I'll put my money on this one. If it's wrong, I eat that part. I didn't
Use deductive reasoning.
I didn't charge my customer for it. So, but if a lot of the percentage of the times that fixed it. And so it was like he said, I was using reasoning with their answers.
Mhm.
If their answers weren't accurate, my reasoning wasn't accurate.
Right.
So anyway, that's the way I handled the early years
Sure.
of
That reasoning was that was your system. All I needed was the data
yeah,
and to plug into the system.
Yeah.
So look at y'all, the two of y'all still bringing the two different schools together, kind of
Yeah.
old and new
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. that's the way we did it.
Yeah. So and one of the things that just that even the diagnostic work you were describing kind of brings its own kind of, I guess, a rate of failure. I know that's a hard word, but most of us who are pretty mature are not that intimidated. But through the years, how has failure become an asset to you?
Oh, we had plenty of bad times that I misguessed, and if I did misguess with their information, I didn't charge the customer. I just asked the customer, carry it to the dealer, let them do what they have to do. The only thing that I ask is, for all of my expense and troubles, I would like the answer, so that if I have this same problem, at least I'll know what to do about it. And so a lot of the times it was really a small, simple answer, but it wasn't easy to get to that answer.
Right.
And the dealer having more knowledge of the same types of vehicles and everything, and schools to go to, and books and more computer information. Anyway, they would find the answer.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I had a customer that I asked her about that and brought it to me, and what we were seeing on her vehicle that I finally give her all my expense and everything free. So she brought me back the answer, and it was a fuel pump. And we had read fuel pump pressures and everything. It was, the only thing is the pressure was slow to come up, but it would get to the amount of pressure it would call for. But because it was slow to come up, that wasn't accurate. Yeah, according to the deal, when you turn the key, it should jump up. So they replaced the fuel pump, corrected the problem. I wouldn't take the chance on replacing the fuel pump because it was putting out the right amount of pressure. It was taking a little bit to get up there, but it was doing its job. So anyway, that was knowledge that we didn't have. So
Right. And a little costly, but
yeah, a little costly, but I did get the answer. And from that time on, I had several jobs that involved that. We were able to correct them properly.
there you go.
So looking back on your life, you talked about Miss Virginia, and you talked about how y'all got married and all that stuff, but you left a part out that I'm very curious about. How'd y'all meet?
Through my cousins, skating rink, bowling, playing baseball. It's different bunch of groups, different age people, all out in a little field in DeQuincy, Louisiana, out there playing ball, and I played ball. That's just different things.
So
like
did you
that.
hit her in the head with a ball to convince her to go with you? How did you do it?
Well, it took time. It was a pretty good little period of time, but we dated some during that time, and she was a lot better skater than I. I didn't have good balance, and she was a better bowler.
Oh,
Yeah. And but she had a higher handicap than me, but she was consistent. So with a handicap and your consistency, you're good.
Yeah.
right.
So anyway, things like that.
So how long have y'all been married now?
62 years.
Come on.
62 years. I mean, there ought to be a public award for stuff like that one day. 62 years, that's impressive.
Right.
Now, I've heard you say many times, you can't judge how to be married by my marriage.
Well, that's correct.
And I think that's an accurate assessment for anybody.
Yes.
But for you and Miss Virginia, would you say that there is a secret to y'all's longevity of relationship, or is it, how do y'all communicate that keeps it so successful?
Now, I can tell you there's not a secret to it. It's a pure fact. She put up an awful lot of my crap.
So she's responsible for being patient enough.
He's a
There's no doubt.
tolerant, patient, long suffering. I mean, just go down the list.
There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt she's the answer.
That's
Yeah.
great.
That is good for her.
Yeah, I have
Good for you.
I've had a lot of young men ask me, you know, and they were in the process of getting a divorce, and they'd ask me about my knowledge about it. And so I told them, I said, well, the one thing that I've learned in my life is I can't give my advice to another young person because there's not another person in this world that I know of my advice would work with.
Mm.
It worked for me and my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, I mean, I go ahead and say what you're going to
I
say.
don't think it would work for another.
And I think that's a common thing
Mhm.
across the board,
Mhm.
that there's not one piece of advice from any one couple that would necessarily apply to everyone. However, there are bits and pieces of behavior that are universal.
Yes.
Mhm.
And something you just showed to the entire world was priceless. Do you know what that is? Humility.
Yes.
Well,
Humility. And as a man, this is one of our hardest things to adopt
Mhm.
is humility. You gave her all the credit, okay? And I'll agree that, you know, she probably deserves a lot of credit.
No, there's no doubt.
I agree.
There's not a probability in this world. There's a fact.
Fact. So she, and that happens with any marriage, I believe, that's going to be successful. I think there, especially with on our part as men, the woman has to wait on us to grow up.
Mm.
I don't know what our problem is, but we like to stay a child far longer than we should. I know that myself, you call yourself hard-headed. You say you took after your daddy. I'm as hard-headed as a rock. I mean, there ain't no doubt about it. I mean, I don't know how my wife has put up with me because I'm so stubborn. I'll get something in my head and I may die chasing it, whatever it is. You know what I mean? But I think that may be a universal truth as well.
Maybe it is.
That we are all a bunch of goober, immature, you know, hardheads.
That's another one of those facts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think that's you're a great example
Yes.
of humility, and the way you expressed yourself is, I mean, that's just very astute, very just very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
So if you could give some advice to somebody, a young person, we're going to talk about a little different angle, but if you could give some advice to somebody, let's say a younger man who's wanting to open up a auto shop, you know, we ain't gonna call it a mechanic shop because it ain't no more, but a technical automotive repair shop. What advice might you give them?
Well, probably two or three things. One thing is yeah, you really do need business experience of some sort, maybe through your family or, you know, inherited it from maybe your dad's been in business and you've been around his business enough to know that what he does about this, anything at all, but have some business experience. And another thing is that you got to remember that your family is actually first. You do your utmost to fix a vehicle the best ability, but you have to have somebody pay you to do that. And I was too bad about, I had a tough life. I know people today, some of them have tough lives, and so you feel too sorry for them and you do a bunch of work and it all winds up for free. And so you've cheated your family, number one. And I never realized all of that until I retired. I always was able to make a little more money here, a little more money there, give away some money here, but make a little more here. And it seemed like it was working out. But in the end, in retirement, I realized that my family doesn't have as good a retirement as they could have. if I'd have been more business minded.
That's good advice.
Mhm.
Put your family 1st.
Mhm.
Don't sacrifice in the moment. Think about the future
Yeah,
for your
sure.
family.
Let
Yeah.
them be your more of your reason or more of your why.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we're drawing to a close. We're coming close to the end of our interview. But before we do, I want to ask you this. Is there anything that we've missed?
Yeah,
That,
yeah, there is. It's an important part of my life, and
please share it. That's why I asked that.
I get to crying here.
That's okay. You can cry all you want. I might cry with you.
Well, it's a sad, but super important deal. This bad
You take your time, Fred.
Carl Kalisha.
Mm-hmm.
You know him. He probably doesn't, but he was a member of this lodge. But long years back, when I was having my really tough days, my boy was sick all the time, and we couldn't even pay attention, much less anything else. And Carl's Johnny on the spot. It's an outhouse business. He serviced outhouses, and he had trucks to do that job. And so they'd break down, and he needed somebody to work on them. And so he knew enough about my life that I was having super tough times. So he come to me one day, and he he handed me $2,000. That was like gold. So he told me he knew I was a proud man too, so he didn't give it to me. He handed it to me. He said, "I want you to work on my trucks, but I'm gonna pay you in advance." He said, "You work on them and you get them fixed, and when we're satisfied that that's paid off," he said, "then I'll give you some more, and that way you just keep my trucks rolling." Well, of course, that was the easy part of my life, is making vehicles roll. So I did, and it seemed to me like whenever I'd gotten about $1,500 worth of labor paid back to him, he come give me 2,000 more. He said, "That's all paid off." I said, "No, I don't think so, Carl." I said, "Yeah." He said, "I keep track of it." And so this went on for 2 or 3, 4 years,
Wow.
and made all the difference in the world of my life. I like to tell stories about Carl. He's he was a hard man to know what kind of person he really is. In the world, he probably seemed like a Scrooge, mean, ornery, worthless person, but I knew sides of his life that side there. Another side that he liked to have fun and wanted people around him to have fun. He sponsored for me to race for him, put the bill for us to build the car and to race it. Paid all the family to race, all the help, all the expenses. Just spent a fortune on me racing. And so that was another part of his life. He enjoyed having fun and people having fun with him. He was kind-hearted because he got me off down out of the floor. And yet on the same other hand, on his romantic side, I remember really good, he was divorced and single, running around. And so he kind of fell in love with his secretary. So one day he had run his route himself, he was shorthanded. So he come in from work, hung his keys just on the inside of the door on a key ring, and went across the office floor there and into the restroom there and washed his hands all good, washed his face, walked back across, stepped outside the door, put his head back in the door, and looked at Betty, his secretary, and said, "I'm fixing to go get married. Do you want to come along?" Betty, knowing him as well as I knew him, bailed up out of her chair, set sail around there, and went and got married. And come back, got back in the chair, went back to work.
That is great.
So that's the romantic side of Carl. So I like to tell about him some because there again, he was a super person in my life.
That's love, Fred.
Yep.
That is true brotherly love, true friendship between men.
Right.
That is beautiful. I wish there was more of that today.
Yeah.
They're still there. I mean, we still have it.
Right.
But I wish there's more of it. And
Yeah.
I wish there was more men willing to talk about it
Yeah. It's hard.
with honor and respect and character like you just did. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for honoring him the way you did.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
He earned it.
Boy, well, you earned his respect as well.
Mhm.
You may not have earned it before he gave it. Sound like he was a man that would give it and then let you earn it.
Yeah.
But you're honoring him well, and you're living a life that honors the way he helped you, and that's
Right.
good. That's very good.
Thank you.
So that story about asking her the way he asked her to marry him, that is phenomenal. I've never heard one quite like that. I'm going to get married. You want to come?
That's not hearsay.
Right.
That's a fact. That's the way it went down.
That is amazing. That is one of the greatest proposal stories I've ever heard in my
I'm
life.
telling you, do you want to come along?
That's great stuff. Well, thank you for that. Thank you
Yes.
for that. I've got a question that I ask every guest that comes on our show. But first, I'd like to say thank you to you. Thank you for being our guest. Thank you for sharing your life with us. Chuck, is there anything you'd like to add?
Oh, I just echo that. Thank you, Fred. It's been a pleasure to see you kind of unravel from the beginnings of crisscrossing the South, if
Yeah.
you will, from New Mexico back to Louisiana and points in between and
Ping ponging all over the place.
and but following the passion. You found that passion as a young man, and I appreciate your dad not dissuading you. He's honest.
Yeah.
He didn't dissuade you. He just said, "That's what you want.
Yeah.
I'll tell you everything I know," and what a difference it's made.
Yeah.
And you've been able to parlay that into serving people. Serving, and like that strong emphasis of motto you had for your company, and evidently you're still doing it today. You're still a
Yes,
giver. We appreciate that. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank
Well,
you.
I'm going to tell you this. You may not see yourself as rich or successful monetarily that way. You talk about yourself as though you wish you'd been better about money and things like that. But you're a very rich man, Fred. You are wealthy beyond most imagination.
Something I'd like to say right quick
No, please.
along that line is that you always hear about it, you'll be paid back. It's hard to picture that you'd ever be paid back some of the things you lost during the time. But it's unbelievable how much I've been paid back. It's tremendous.
Wow.
I'm super, super proud of things I've been paid back.
I love that.
I do too. It
I
sounds
love
like
that.
you received that not with an expectation, but more with
No.
appreciation.
And not only not an expectation, a disbelief,
Yeah.
but it happens.
That's beautiful.
That's beautiful.
It is.
That's a powerful testimony right there,
Mhm.
Fred. True. The last question I got for you, unless there's anything else you'd like to add. The last question I have for you is if you could go back in time and speak to your younger self when before you even met Miss Virginia, you're still in high school, if you could give yourself some advice, whisper in your own ear some words of wisdom, what would you say?
Well, I think the only thing that I would ever consider differently was that is to be more in mind of your family and what you do to hurt them in the long run that you give away. Yes, we all have certain amounts that we need to give away, but then restrict that amount and keep in mind that every bit that you're giving away like that, you're cheating your family. So don't cheat your family.
Good advice.
That is.
Well, Fred, thank you for being our guest on our Pursuit of Purpose podcast. Thank you for sharing your life with us, your time with us, and your wonderful stories. Thank you so much.
Thank you for even considering me.
Well, it's more than a consideration. You're one of my targets. For those of you out there who have joined us today, thank you so much. I'm Rob.
I'm Chuck.
And today we've had with us
Fred
Lovell, a living legend here in Southeast Texas. Thank you all out there for allowing us to become a part of the pursuit of your purpose. Have a great day.